Brought to you by concordiatheology.org, bringing you resources that support the vigorous life of the mind in service of the gospel of Christ.
Welcome to Tangible, Theology Learned and Lived. We're exploring the ways in which theology permeates all aspects of life. Through conversations with faculty at Concordia Seminary St. Louis, we will challenge you to deepen your theology and live out your faith in Christ. I'm your producer and host, Jessica Bordolo. I'll talk with a variety of professors on a variety of topics, something different every episode, but all pointing to the intersection of faith and daily life, because it's tangible, theology learned and lived. Today we're talking about Hosea. What does this prophet from the 8th century BC and the story of his promiscuous wife have to do with 21st century Christians? Here to talk about it is Dr. Kevin Golden. Dr. Golden is currently in the midst of writing a commentary on the book of Hosea. He is a professor of exegetical theology and the dean of theological research and publications here at Concordia Seminary St. Louis. Dr. Golden, welcome to the show.
It is a blessing to be with you, Jessica. Blessing to be with my favorite podcast host.
Thank you. Dr. Golden requested that Dr. David Lewis come as his conversation partner. Dr. Lewis is a professor of exegetical theology here at Concordia Seminary St. Louis. One of his areas of expertise is narrative criticism, which makes him ideally suited for a conversation about Hosea, the prophet whose life was a narrative message. Dr. Lewis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jessica. It's great to be here. I would agree with Dr. Golden on my favorite podcast.
Thanks, guys. That is high praise.
And might I also just say a great reason for Dr. Lewis to be here is you can kind of thank him for me doing this because he taught me Hebrew back in the day. He was
Nice.
He was a graduate student here when I entered seminary, and I needed to learn Hebrew. He taught me Hebrew. So if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be a professor of Old Testament. And
then the irony, of course, is that Dr. Golden got his PhD before I did. But
I wasn't going to bring that up.
I brought it up just to put everything in perspective.
The apprentice has become the master.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. When it comes to Hebrew, so yeah.
So Hosea is one of those little books in the Old Testament that we often overlook. It's not one of the big stories like Abraham or Moses, and we never talked about it in Sunday school.
Understandably so.
Probably for good reason. But I want to hear more of the historical context. Tell me about the time when Hosea was written.
So 8th century BC is a pretty tumultuous time for the people of God. It starts off very good for the people of God, for Israel and Judah. It is often referred to as the Silver Age for Israel and Judah. Very good time, but you know what happens during good times? That gives way to complacency. When you are enjoying prosperity, to whom do you give credit for your prosperity? And so those become our idols, if you will. A big problem then was the worship of Baal. The basic idea behind the worship of Baal was fertility. It was a fertility cult. And so, if you will, the way that Hosea is wanting to address this is he says, my people are unfaithful to me. They have, instead of them trusting in the Lord, they're trusting in Baal for their prosperity. They're looking to all these false gods.
So that foundation for the book of Hosea kind of builds up to the story. This was a great coincidence. A listener of the show contacted me and said that she is leading a Bible study on the book of Hosea. Shout out to Shara in California. And so she sent some questions, but that she would like you to answer to help her facilitate the study.
Fantastic.
So, first question. Do we read the story of Hosea's marriage to Gomer as a literal event, something that actually happened, or do we read it as a parable to illustrate this message?
It is a literal event. It is a historical event that actually happened. You look at Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. Often we would say the first verse of a prophet is the most important because it gives the historical context for that prophet. And we get that here in Hosea 1, verse 1. We find out the various kings during whose reign he was prophesying. Furthermore, he's identified as Hosea, the son of Beeri. Now, his father's name is not that important, to be quite honest, not theologically important. But what it does is it grounds us this is a historical person. Gomer, his wife, is described very similarly. She is Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, again, she is a historical individual. These are real people with a real marriage.
I think your question is legit, though, because if you look at the story, it's out there.
Yes.
It's not a typical Bible story or a typical life of a prophet.
This is very true. And in fact, now there are other prophets who are called upon by the Lord to do some rather shocking things. I think about Isaiah, who's told by the Lord, go around naked for a while, all right? Because this is going to be, if you will, an object lesson. It's going to be proclaiming something to the people about what's going to happen to them as well. Surprising that God would tell his people to do this, but nevertheless, that's the point. It is meant to shock us, to get our attention.
Well, I agree with Dr. Golden that this is a historical truth. When I taught Hosea as a pastor, a lot of people were offended by this, and they insisted that this had to have been an allegory because they said God would never order a man to marry a whore, right? That
Whoa. Whore, that's kind of strong language.
Indeed,
yeah. But that is the word that's used in Hosea. And it says that explicitly in the text, take yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord, by forsaking Yahweh. So Hosea's historical marriage becomes a symbol, an allegory for the relationship of Yahweh to the people of Israel, who are doing to Yahweh, their husband, as Gomer will be doing to Hosea, her husband. And so this is an allegory for Israel, as Dr. Golden mentioned, forsaking Yahweh for the false gods, for Baal, and thinking that Baal is the one providing her with all of the riches and all of the blessings they have, when in fact it's Yahweh. I don't know, Dr. Golden, what would you?
I would go right along with that. And with that term whore, I kind of debated this a bit when I was doing the translational kind of work. I initially was going with a wife of fornication,
right,
to try to maybe take the edge off a little bit. But I went back to that term whore because the text is meant to smack us upside the head.
Which it certainly does.
I wouldn't use the term prostitute. Sometimes that's what's used because the term that's used in the Hebrew does not technically mean that she has to be doing this for pay. So that
see.
Gomer could be, if you will, whoring after these other men just because they provide her with nice things, not because they are paying her for her activity. That's in the realm of possibilities. But whore, it really has that potent description of one who just runs out after others other than the spouse.
And that does make it different than, let's say, a woman who's trapped into a lifestyle because that's the only way that she can provide for herself. That's a different story.
Yes, yeah. Now, related to that also is I myself struggle even more with the fact that their children are described as children of whoredom or whoring children.
No, what does that mean?
So, one that has been suggested is that, well, the children are a result of Gomer's illicit affairs. But actually the text would drive us away from that, because the text actually says that these children are born for Hosea, all right? And so, Dr. Lewis, you'll appreciate this, maybe some of our listeners as well. It's a lamed going on there. So you could say the lamed of possession or the lamed of kind of almost like advantage. So these are children, no matter how you understand that Hebrew construction, the point is the children are Hosea's. But why would they be called, therefore, children of whoredom or whoring children? And in the end, where I really settle on this issue is because this is very difficult for Americans to get in our head, because we are so fiercely individualistic. But this is a matter of, if you will, corporate shame. The corporate mentality that just is found throughout the whole of Scripture. So it's not just, if you will, me and the Lord, but it's me, the Lord, and all y'all, all right? That we are bound up in this thing together. And so the shame of the mother's adultery, if you will, spreads to the children as well, even though they are not engaged in that adulterous activity or that whoring activity.
So, a question that has been asked is, are they Hosea's children? His biological children.
And I would say they are.
Okay.
They are his biological children.
How do you read that,
Well,
Dr. Lewis?
because I've heard before that Jezreel, the first is, because you actually have the Lamed there.
You have the Lamed there.
Is the Lamed used for the next two?
So if you look at the progression of the three children, you have a very full construction for Jezreel, the first child, and then you have a more condensed construction for the second child, that's Lo Ruchama, and then Lo Ami, the third child, it's even more condensed. The way that I myself read that text is that what's true for the first is true for each of those. You just use a more condensed construction each time, just as a way of progression of the Hebrew.
So do you agree with him, Dr. Lewis?
He's the expert on this. I've always, when I taught Bible study, I sort of, my natural inclination was to go with what I've seen in other commentaries, that Jezreel was actually his son, but then No Mercy and Not My People were the result of her affairs. I'm more comfortable with what you said, but it's just the thing, even if they're his biological children, they're given names that sort of indicate they're not his biological children.
So
and that's really the big issue, is the names themselves, especially of those.
Right.
The second and third child.
Yes, and even the first child as well.
Yeah, I know,
Each one of those
Jezreel,
names have a whole lot poured into the names of their significance. And one of the reasons why I kind of make a big deal, or I really push for, they are all Hosea's actual children, is because they are pointing toward Israel, who is
interesting,
the child of God.
Right.
All right. And so even though, if you will, just as Israel goes whoring out after the Baals, and yet Israel still is Yahweh's bride, still is Yahweh's child, all right? And therefore, these are actually, as the metaphor is going on, these are Hosea's actual children.
Is it fair to say there's enough theological evidence on both sides that experts could go either way?
I think so. But I know that I'm right.
Okay. We've been in debates on other issues before. So,
yeah, that's fine.
Give me the full narrative. Tell me the story of Hosea.
So he's told to marry a whore. She does give birth to 3 children that I would contend are all Hosea's offspring. The first one, all 3 are given their names by Yahweh himself.
Right.
He's the one that says, here's the name, and he gives a reason for it. Because again, what is true with Hosea's family is also true with Yahweh's family. So the first child is to be named Jezreel. There's a lot packed into that name, Jezreel. There's a backstory for the city of Jezreel. It is a rather bloody backstory for Jezreel. But also, the name Jezreel is a Hebrew word that means God will sow. God will sow. And that's going to play significantly in the future. That verb to sow is used a bit in Hosea. Such as, you have sown the wind, you will reap the whirlwind. We even use that in our own parlance, all right? And so there's, if you will, the law side of it. Sow the wind, reap the whirlwind is about you're going to get the results of your sin. You're going to pay the price.
And that's the kid's name.
That's the kid's name, Jezreel. Also, Jezreel itself was a city. There was a city named Jezreel, and that was the site of a lot of blood that was shed. Blood that was shed in sin. And so there's just this negative connotation that goes with Jezreel. And so therefore, it's a heavy name, but it's one that later Yahweh turns around, God will sow, that sow becomes a gospel statement. He sows the seed that brings forth the fruit that he would give to his people. By the way, this is the end of chapter 2, where all the names get turned around in a very positive way in Hosea.
Okay, so far in the narrative, God tells Hosea to marry Gomer, who is an unfaithful woman. She has Jezreel. What happens next?
The second child is Lo Ruchama.
Yeah.
A daughter.
Yeah, No Mercy. Right.
That's a great name.
Yeah. You think about kids having names that'll give them complexes later in life, but yeah, and the meaning of her name is that God will have no more mercy on Israel to forgive them. Right? He's going to withhold mercy and forgiveness from them because of their whoredom, because they've been unfaithful to Him. And so that's the symbolic nature of her name, is that God is now going to withhold mercy from the people of Israel, which is a law statement. These are all law names. These are law names, not gospel names. There's going to be that big switch, but these are all law names.
This is tangible. Tangible. We are theology learned and lived. Well, one of the things to keep in mind as you live out what we're talking about today is that there is a distinction in Scripture. There are those passages that are prescriptive, that tell you what you're supposed to do. Then there's also passages that are descriptive in that they describe what was happening there in a specific setting that you're not necessarily supposed to repeat. So there's a whole lot of descriptive stuff going on here. Yahweh tells Hosea, marry a whore. That is descriptive, not prescriptive. Tell your kids, find a pious, faithful spouse, etc. All right? Certainly also when it comes to naming of these children, please don't name your child No Compassion or Not My People or
Lo Ami.
Lo Ami. No, don't do the Hosea chapter 1 naming of children. That was specific to Hosea.
And that third child's name was?
Lo Ami.
Okay.
Which is not my people.
Not my people.
Right. At this point, Yahweh says, you are not my people and I am not your God.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
And I think it's actually, and I contend for this in the commentary that will be forthcoming. Hopefully here in about a year, we'll physically have it in our hands.
And it will be available at concordiatheology.org.
There you go.
Yeah.
But I think it's even more potent than that when it comes to Lo Ami, because I've not found that English translations handle this all that well. At the tail end of this, when we're talking about Lo Ami, not my people, there is a nominal sentence. Now, Dr. Lewis will appreciate a nominal sentence that goes on there, where here's what the Lord says. He says, call his name Lo Ami because you, not my people. All right, that's a nominal sentence. You, not my people, where you have to supply a form of am, are, was, were, etc. You let context drive it. We do this in English as well. I could say to you, well, it's not as helpful this year as what it is in some years, but the Cardinals, good. The Cubs, bad. You naturally supply are in there. Well, that's what's going on here. So, for you, not my people, right? But then he turns around and says, and I, not I am for you. Now, often that I am is translated as if I am not for you or something like that. But actually what I would argue, because you start off with that nominal sentence, Dr. Lewis.
Right.
Now you actually add in the verb. It's actually meant to be understood as the divine name that is used in Exodus chapter 3. And that just kind of is like the biggest hammer coming down, where what God is saying is, I am not, I am for you, all right? That the very name by which I revealed myself to Moses and sent him to bring about the Exodus so I could work through him, this is how grievous your sin is. I am not, I am for you.
Ouch.
And this is the name.
Yeah.
This is the name when Moses asks, by what name should I tell them? And the name is, I am what I am. Yahweh is the name. This is the name that, in a sense, Yahweh, God is Elohim to the nations. He's God to everybody, but to Israel, he reveals his name, Yahweh. That's pretty profound.
I think it's huge. Yeah, I am not, I am for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Which means he's, in a sense, the covenant's over.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a case for exegetical studying of
This is why
Hebrew grammar.
I got chills right now.
It's
awesome.
It is significant.
just from the grammar.
Just from the grammar. Yeah. And so we would say God is found in the details, and this is a rather big detail that comes out.
So in a sense, he would you agree that he is sort of the covenant's over?
Right.
No more mercy, no forgiveness. You're not my people.
Yes.
And
now,
it's not just I'm not your God. I'm not Yahweh for you anymore.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, if you go to the previous one, the lo rukama,
right?
The way I contend, he chooses rukama, compassion, no compassion, because it runs back to Exodus 34.
Right.
Because this is when Moses is up on Mount Sinai. God hides him in the cleft of the rock, and he passes by. Moses gets to look on God's back, and God proclaims his own name, and he says, Yahweh, Yahweh, the God. And he uses a host of descriptors there. But the first one is Rukama. Now, it's the same word, slightly different form, but the very first descriptor he uses of himself is compassionate, or however you want to turn, mercy, however you want to translate that. And so that's what I would say is kind of in view when you look at Exodus 34 and this revelation of who God is. He is gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. All these great gospel words. This gets repeated 14 or more times in the Old Testament, kind of in sometimes varying forms, sometimes condensed, sometimes the word order is changed a little bit, but it's always hearkening back to Exodus 34. The interesting thing is, whenever it gets repeated, the first one is always Rukama, this form of Rukama, that the first thing is always compassionate. And so that's what I think is actually going on here with no compassion, is it's going, hey, you know what? I revealed myself to Moses on Mount Sinai as the compassionate God, but because of what you have done, you have forsaken, you have abandoned my compassion. I am not that for you because you have run away from it.
So do you see a building in the meanings of these three names?
I do.
Towards the third kid is sort of the climax. It's been building up to this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
And this is all just chapter 1.
Yeah.
All chapter 1.
What happens
this is
after
the story.
babies?
Well, this is the story.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So chapter 1 gives us the story of Hosea, his wife, his children. Chapter 2 then gets into what is true for Hosea and his family is true for Yahweh and his family. All right? Now, chapter 2 gets into just how Israel has gone off the rails, chasing after the Baals, that she attributes that these false gods are the ones that give her what she needs. It even gets to the point she is running after all these false gods. Now, I'll ask the two of you, if you have such a whoring spouse, what is the natural response to that?
So I guess this marriage is over.
And yet,
and Old Testament would be death.
Adultery
was a capital offense.
Yeah.
You know?
So she deserves death at this point.
Yeah, divorce would be the easy thing. Death would
Right.
be what she actually deserves.
Yes.
Certainly not going out of my way to show her love and favor.
Yes.
Right.
And so what does Yahweh do? He woos his wayward bride. So this is chapter 2, verse 14 in your English translation. And you may notice it starts off with the word therefore, in Hebrew, lakain. Now that should kind of point you to, because all of this, what I was just talking about, is true, here's what I'm going to do. So we've just heard Yahweh talking about, what is Israel doing? Running around like a whore after all these false gods. So my bride is a whore, therefore I would expect I'm going to divorce her. But instead he says, I will woo her. All right. Now that's the translation I used. I was teaching this to students this last year in a class on Hosea, and I told them the verb that's translated here as woo, most of your English translations probably use allure or something like that.
That's what my Bible has.
Is often used in Hebrew for seduce.
Oh.
So I thought about, that's another kind of provocative term.
Yeah.
And I thought about, I've kind of battled with that. Whore is provocative. Why not use seduce? It's just as, stay with the provocative. But I like to use the word woo because it's this matter of, the context there is he describes as if he's going to try to do a new honeymoon with her.
Yeah, you woo a bride.
You woo a bride,
That's how
yeah.
you date the girl that you really love.
And so he talks about going back to the wilderness.
Right.
This is, if you will, where he was on a honeymoon with his bride back in the day, right after the Exodus. And so he's reestablished, I'm going to win her back. I'm going to woo her by taking her back to our honeymoon. Now, this is just beautiful, but it also gives you this insight into Yahweh. What does he do when his people go astray? He woos them. He doesn't kick them to the curb and say, well, gave it a good try, but that's that. No, he woos them to win them back. And then the rest of chapter 2 plays that out, where his wooing gets a positive response. But I would underscore that, and this is really true throughout the rest of chapter 2, it's always the Lord who's doing the action. He does his thing, and then Israel responds, if you will. It's always him taking the initiative.
I mean, this is really incredible about Hosea, is that, no, she doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah.
He punishes her in the first half of chapter 2. Verses 1 through 13 is what he's going to do. He's going to take away all these good things. But then when he does that, it's not her coming to him in sackcloth and ashes saying, I'm going to be a better wife. He goes back to, like you might say, the pre-wedding, in the engagement. He's the guy coming to her door with the roses.
Yeah.
And trying to, I mean, it's really a profound picture of God's grace.
It is.
Is that he's the one who acts before she can respond. He's the one taking the initiative. Mm-hmm. So it'd be a story that it wouldn't be a very good movie in the sense that
No.
we would want to see the errant spouse, whether husband or wife, repent and then try to win them back. This is how most romantic comedies would take it. But here it's actually him. Yahweh goes to Israel, and he's the one who initiates the renewal of the marriage, in a sense.
Yes. And I think this comes again very clearly in the Hebrew, because Yahweh is saying, you know what? I am not going to give up on her.
Right.
I am after her. I'm going to win her back. And it just keeps going on that way.
And so you might say the theological heart of why did Yahweh ask Hosea to marry Gomer, have these 3 kids, name them that, is explained in chapter 2.
And as it goes with that in chapter 2, chapter 3 gives us
Yeah, tell me what's the next part of the story. I'm waiting
Gomer
here.
redeems his bride. So he gets Gomer back. Gomer ends up, if you will, penitent. So it mentions that he goes and he purchases her, or he procures her, or he pays the price to get her back, if you will.
How does that work? Because you said she wasn't a prostitute.
Well, right. And so this could be, if you will, kind of almost like paying the bridal price. By the way, Yahweh does something very similar in chapter 2. All right? So if you go back to chapter 2, verse 19, and it talks about how this is Yahweh speaking, I will betroth you, O Israel, to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness, justice, steadfast love, and mercy. Those 4 things. Now, this is again where the Hebrew is kind of helpful, because the verb that's being used there to describe paying a bridal price. So what the groom pays to the father of the bride in order to win her hand.
So he's treating her like a pure bride again.
Exactly. And
that's a little bit more significant than just
it's
buying.
as if Yahweh is coming here as both suitor, soon to be husband, but also to whom does he pay these things? If you will, he pays it to himself because he's also Israel's father. Yeah. And so he pays to himself the price of gaining her. Now, this is just kind of screaming out, right? The sacrificial death of Christ. To whom does he pay a redemption price? To himself, if you will. That it is always Yahweh who pays the price, and he's not paying the price to buy off somebody else, but rather the price is even paid to himself. So in the mystery of the Trinity, you have the Son who pays the redemption price for the people of God to the Father. Hosea does the same thing for Gomer.
Can you comment then on chapter 2, verse 16 from the English text?
But in that day you will call me my husband, and no longer will you call me my Baal. The word Baal means owner or Lord. And it is even used a couple times in the Old Testament for a wife referring to her husband as her Lord. He says, no longer are you going to do that, because I think partly it's just the distaste that is now present with that word Baal, because she's chased after these false gods, but also because of the distinction between Baal and husband. Now, it's translated as my husband. The Hebrew really doesn't have a distinct word for husband. It's just man.
Right.
All right?
My man.
This is my man. None of the others are
Right.
my man.
Yeah.
Only this one is my man.
It sounds more intimate than my Lord.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I think they are relational terms.
Yeah. And do you think this points us then to the relationship in the New Testament of Jesus to his church?
Indeed. Yes. Yeah, most certainly so.
And I know that you're a New Testament guy. Give me more.
Hosea plays a significant role in the New Testament. It's one place in which the apostles use Hosea has to do with the inclusion of the Gentiles. Of all the nations in the world, only Israel could say they were God's people in those days. Yahweh gives his name specifically to the people of Israel. Israel are his people. Jesus has come to redeem Israel, I would say in fulfillment of what Yahweh's promised here in Hosea chapter 2. And interestingly, Israel at that time could also still be described, Mark 8, verse 38. He says, for whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this sinful and adulterous and sinful generation. I think that word adulterous harks back to Hosea, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, that Jesus comes to a people who are still adulterous and sinful, to, you might say, in a sense, to betroth them, to woo them back. And many people of Israel do come to faith in Jesus, but many reject him. And so Israel first, but then after Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension, now the apostles are to continue to preach to Israel and to the nations. Paul in Romans 9, 25 to 26, makes use of Hosea. And it says Hosea 2:25. Indeed, he says in Hosea, this is Paul quotes Hosea, those who are not my people I will call my people, and her who is not beloved I will call my beloved. And Peter makes reference to Hosea in 1 Peter 2:10. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. In a sense, Hosea has taken, the promise has taken, you might say, even a greater step, where now it's literally people who are outside, who are always outside, are now shown mercy, grace, and God says, you're my people. Hosea is a living book for the apostolic church.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Jesus quotes it, and then the apostles are reading this book, and they're seeing it actually being fulfilled in the mission of Jesus and now in the mission of the church.
Right. Right.
In other words, you want to talk about tangible. Hosea should not be a dead book for Christians, because this is a book in which the apostles saw the gospel just oozing out of it.
This is something that I know Dave and I both teach our students, but you can't understand the Old Testament without the New Testament.
And you can't understand the New Testament without the Old Testament.
Yeah, they're just, because they go hand in hand. They're part of one unified whole. What are we doing in our sermons?
Yeah.
We are delivering the wooing word of Yahweh to his people.
That's awesome.
Our final question is always this. Dr. Golden, what do you want our listeners to remember?
This is just how much he will not give up on his bride, that he will not give up on his children. He takes on human flesh. He lives and fulfills the law. He suffers and dies in that body. He rises again in that body. He's going to come again in that body. That he himself is tangible.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is theology, learned and lived, all bound up in one person. But there also you just see how Yahweh won't quit, how he just keeps coming, because this is what Christ himself does.
That's all for today. I'd like to thank Dr. Lewis for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, Jessica. This is great to talk Bible with my colleague, Dr. Kevin Golden.
Dr. Golden, just so you know, usually when guests come on the show to talk about a book, they bring me a copy of the book and they sign it and they give it to me. I'm expecting that when your commentary is published, you know where my office is.
Yes, I do, here in about a year, and I will definitely be happy to deliver you a copy.
Thanks for being on the show. And thank you for listening. You can find more episodes of Tangible on all of the major hosting apps or on our website, concordiatheology.org. Check it out. We've got a lot more resources there. If you'd like to see the show continue, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It changes Google's algorithms, so it's easier for people to find us. I'm your producer and host, Jessica Bordolo. Join me next time when we talk about the intersection of theology and daily life, because it's tangible. Theology learned and lived.